What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's reaction video is America is not Europe.
Is that a trick question?
That's what I mean. Like, you look at a map.
It's definitely not. We know
it's
that.
Definitely not. We've lived. I saw a comment the other day that they think a lot of British don't see themselves as Europeans, which I can kind of guess because
I say I'm British.
we say we're British, but I guess from an American point of view, we're technically European.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I kind of get both sides to the argument. But yeah, so we've technically lived in Europe. America definitely isn't here.
Do you know what I've got a question about?
What?
So obviously, like, we're classed as Europeans.
Yeah.
American people are classed as Americans.
Yep.
So, like, what's Brazil then? If you're from Brazil, what's the continent's South America, isn't it?
Yeah.
So would you say you're South American?
Yeah, South Americans.
Okay.
Or Brazilians.
say that
Or
out loud.
Brazilians or something like that, I'd guess.
Yeah, but isn't saying I'm Brazilian the same as saying I'm British?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. And South American.
Would be the equivalent of saying I'm European.
Yeah, definitely. Whereas I think my guess would be, again, this is probably just on a British lens, maybe a Spanish person is more likely to say I'm European than a British person is. Mm-hmm. Would be my guess. That's just because we see Spain as Europe more than we do ourselves, I guess. But again, that is just your own lens. No clue what to expect of this video. 9 minutes, it was suggested to us. We know it's not Europe, so I don't know what it's going to go down. Maybe it's the differences, potentially. What is different about it? No clue. So smash that like button if you enjoy this kind of content. Smash that subscribe button as well. You're absolute legends. And are you ready?
I'm ready.
America's not Europe. What we got? We kind of know, but what we got?
I was born and grew up in Denmark. And these are countries where the government spends taxes and spends approximately twice the level of the United States. Mm-hmm. And while I am very sympathetic to many of your spending proposals, especially on the things you mentioned on early childhood and single payer and the like, I also know that these are countries that heavily tax everybody, not just the rich people. Middle classes, they have consumption taxes on everything of 20%. So while I'm very sympathetic to what you say, my sense is still that you would like to spend as a Scandinavian, but not tax as one. Is that correct?
The answer is, and you raised some very good points.
Comparing the US with Europe and countries in Europe would be naive, oversimplistic, and offend a bunch of people. Land masses are complex. But I'm going to go ahead and compare them anyways, because some of the comparisons between Europe and the US remain way too superficial.
Read my lips.
We'll go back so we can hear all that. Again, I think that was kind of like a political debate then. We don't get it. We try not to get involved in politics. Some people say us reacting to certain videos is getting involved, but we try not to. We don't comment on it, on our opinions and stuff like that. But I guess I was just using an example of them trying to compare to Europe when it's completely different.
Yeah.
I guess that's what it was. I was so confused
I was so confused at the start.
So confused. Let us know in the comments, please.
And the US remain way too superficial.
Read my lips. No.
It's not uncommon to obsess over the usual suspects for why the US is less equal than Europe and also has less good quality, affordable social programs.
A lot more money in the US.
The analysis is simple. The US has more billionaires and taxes them less. Europe has less billionaires but taxes them more. Need a larger tax base to fund popular social programs and also less inequality? Just raise the taxes on the rich, like the Europeans do. Now, although the tax rates for rich people explain some part of the difference, it doesn't explain enough. Europeans can afford good social programs because a lot of Europeans pay a lot for them, mainly through indirect taxes. And Europeans are also more equal before tax is even factored in because a lot of the social programs they pay more for also reduce pre-tax inequality. Where Americans deal with a sales tax at their final point of sale, Europeans deal with a VAT, which is a consumption tax that taxes at multiple steps across entire supply chains. This means that a lot of things in Europe will be more expensive, but that public money can be redistributed towards social programs that will reduce before tax inequality even more. But the US has, so far, been unable to adopt the same. Why? Well, in part because taxing the wealthiest of society is easier to advertise and justify than taxing everybody a lot more. In Europe, most people don't really need to be convinced about paying for their welfare states because it works sufficiently for most of them. But in the US, there's an intimate struggle with deciding whether pre-distribution will be a state, local, or federal solution. Part of the reason is that in the US, the federal government gets the most media attention, while state and local governments can avoid scrutiny. This means that minimum wage hikes in the US are practically always seen as a responsibility for the federal government which has to delicately balance different costs of living, like laborers living in New York City and miners living in West Virginia. In Europe, though, a country like France or Denmark can opt for different geographically sensitive policy while also being held more directly into account because the assignment of responsibility is clearer to its citizens.
There's this definition of a wicked problem, which is circulating around in the literature, which suggests that a wicked problem is wicked if it has so many dimensions to it that you can't go at one angle to the problem and try to fix it. And I think school finance is like that. So school districts get money from their local communities in the form of property taxes. They'll also get money from the state, and the state might give them money through multiple formulas. And then a portion, a much smaller portion, about 9 or 10%, comes from the federal government. So even if you tried to solve the problem at, say, the state level, there are these other funding sources that come with their own restrictions, which ultimately affect how the money gets used in schools.
In Connecticut, the U.S.
So, just so I'm really confused. This video seems to be kind of like about taxes and stuff like that. Again, I'm just a bit wary we're going to get a load of comments saying this is political. We're just reacting to it. We're not going to have any comments on it and stuff like that. Please let us know in the comments. No arguing. But I guess the main point, which I see, please let us know if I'm completely wrong, is to just kind of show that, let's say the UK, for example, there's a head, like, in government.
Yeah.
There's a prime minister. They announce it, like, with the budget and stuff like that at the moment. No one else has any other say in that. Whereas, like you say, there's a state. There's multiple layers, which everyone can change their mind and they'll want to do different things. So if one person does something, it doesn't make a difference to the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's just so much more confusing, so you can't compare. I feel like that's what all this video is.
Yeah.
is using different examples just to kind of go, it's two completely different systems, so although it works in one country, it can't work in this country, or it'll be a lot harder to work.
I feel like they're like just justifying the title.
Definitely. That's the way I see it as well. I'm learning a few new things as well, which is awesome. But let's know in the comments on that, and hopefully it's not... We're not very good with politics, so we're not even very good at it.
A state, a school in Bridgeport will be poorer by virtue of being surrounded by poor properties, while a school in Greenwich will be richer because it is surrounded by richer properties. This is because local taxes are largely funded by property values in the area. However, this concept fails to explain everything. Educational disparities also exist across Europe and within its countries. The US is not unique for having a system that predisposes poor children to poorer resources. Education systems are complex. Finland is not the same as Sweden, and resources invested in education and the quality that follows does not seem like a linear relationship. The US's unique situation is that its quality does not match the amount that the US actually spends on it. One of the problems with answering why resources don't match the quality you would expect in the US is because the decentralized nature of school districts makes it pretty difficult to actually identify what spending works and what doesn't. Overall, there are some indications that, compared with Europe, the amount of staffing, the associated health and retirement benefits, alongside transportation, all add up to more cost for the American education system. But the differences don't end there.
In the 1990s, as the crime rate was plummeting, as American life was getting safer and safer, Americans freaked out and thought that if they take their eyes off their children, the children will be abducted. Now this goes back, the fear was stoked by cable TV in the 1980s. There were a few high-profile abductions. But it's not until the 1990s that we really start locking kids up and saying, you cannot be outside until you're 14 or 15. We took this essential period of childhood from about 8 to 12, when kids throughout history have practiced independence, have gotten into adventures, have made rafts and floated down the Mississippi River. We took that period and said, you don't get to practice independence until it's too late, until that period is over.
Kids in the US are raised differently than kids in Europe. Some blame the planning that produced more isolated American families, some the over-paranoia towards kidnapping in the 1980s, and others point to an increasingly competitive environment where parents try to give their children an edge over the others by helicoptering them. It's really not that far a stretch to say that many European children could be considered to have more freedom at an earlier age. American children are less likely to be able to walk to school alone compared with European children, which you can of course connect to overall crime rates, and authoritative school policy is still much more accepted across the US than it is in Europe.
I guess crime rates will have a have a big say in whether you can go or not. And also, I guess, for size, there's potentially a lot more travelling. Like, I used to walk to walk to school.
Yeah.
Weren't too far away. It was like a 15-minute journey max. Whereas there's probably a lot of people doing more than 15-minute journeys in the US. So that's also another thing as well.
So, the real key to the distinctiveness of America is the structure of our government. One part of it, of course, is the independence of the judiciary. But there's a lot more. There are very few countries in the world, for example, that have a bicameral legislature. Oh, England has a House of Lords for the time being, but the House of Lords has no substantial power. They can just make the Commons pass a bill a second time. France has a Senate, it's honorific. Italy has a Senate, it's honorific. Very few countries have two separate bodies in the legislature equally powerful. That's a lot of trouble, as you gentlemen doubtless know, to get the same language through two different bodies elected in a different fashion. Very few countries in the world have a separately elected chief executive. Sometimes I go to Europe to talk about separation of powers. And when I get there, I find that all I'm talking about is independence of the judiciary. Because the Europeans don't even try to divide the two political powers, the two political branches, the legislature and the chief executive. In all of the parliamentary countries, the chief executive is the creature of the legislature. There's never any disagreement between them and the prime minister, as there is sometimes between you and the president. When there's a disagreement, they just kick him out. They have a no confidence vote, a new election, and they get a prime minister who agrees with the legislature. And the Europeans...
The difference is simple. European countries are mainly nations, not federations. A European state, if it existed, could never be the same as the US. Written in their constitution, US states are modeled after the federal government, and state governments, which mirror the one above, usually have their own Chamber of Representatives, a Senate, and also have an executive mirrored after their president. In Europe, if there was any state that was above the countries that made it up, it would have to be modeled from those very different countries beneath it, rather than serving as a model for the countries below it. This is an important difference because it means that any kind of European government would have to balance parliamentary systems with presidential republics, federal states with unitary ones, and they'll be expected to create a system that hopefully pleases each one sufficiently. All in all, although the differences between the two are practically endless and somewhere near impossible to actually describe, it's still a worthwhile effort to try and figure a few out and also discuss them. In some way, Europe has more breathing room to understand what it wants to be, which is no easy task, because whatever you think Europe is, it can still look across the Atlantic and realize what it definitely is not.
That is true.
Affordable cheese.
Oh, I wish we had well, we don't. I love cheese. I absolutely love cheese.
Cheese.
There's obviously on that list, if you guys were looking at that list then, there's obviously a lot of take and make ones. But there is a lot where you see it on there, which is completely different. If you just go, high school sports was on there, which is completely different. The infrastructure, the money in that and stuff like that. The toilets, we got to pay for toilets sometimes, the way it's cleaned and stuff like that, I'm guessing are different as well. Sales taxes, like you said in the video, we got VAT. I don't think that, you know what, I got a little bit worried about 3 minutes in, because sometimes...
to be fair, I was a bit confused at first.
I was a bit confused by the first clip, I was like... But then we had that little chat, didn't we, about 3 minutes in with you guys as well, where I think it was just showing the differences, which now is confirmed. Yeah. Just examples of the differences, how the political system, some people will say, well, do it like that country because it works like that country potentially. You can't. You know what I mean?
It doesn't work in that... It's like, what works in one country isn't going to work in
the US pretty much, because there's different layers to it and it's completely different. I don't think it was too political. I do apologise if it was. We're gonna, because normally if it is like 3 minutes in, what we'll do is if we enjoy it, we'll carry on watching it. If not, we won't carry on watching it. But either way, we won't post it because we don't want to be controversial. Yeah. We want all you guys to be happy. We don't want to put something out there which is going to annoy so many people, if that makes sense. Because it's normally a 50-50 divide, so we don't want to annoy 50% of the people, because we always say most important thing is being happy, isn't it? So I enjoyed that. Completely different. Learned a few new things in there. Love a bit of affordable cheese. What about you?
Yeah, I saw on there the flag obsession as well.
Flag obsessions, yeah, which is just being patriotic, which
Yeah.
is awesome. We don't do
We're just not like that in England.
We're not, but we love it, by the way.
We love yours, which just means that, like, we love the fact that you do it, so I don't understand why we don't do it for our own flag.
Yeah, it's weird, but I just
I guess
love
the
the patriot for
story
your country.
behind theirs is...
The story's there, but it just reminds me of, like, I know it's different because you guys are just so patriotic about the flag, but the whole thing about it's your country. Oh my god, what is it? The country for free?
Land of the free.
Land of the free. Why did I forget that saying? I do apologise. Land of the free. That just completely escaped my head. But it reminds me of, like, when England doing, like, the Euros or World Cup. Everyone's together and everyone's like, this is my country. I know it's sport, but this is my country and we're together. And you guys are just that passionate about your country in general, which is awesome.
For us, I feel like the only time it is patriotic, but it's still like a wow moment, is at the football games when they sing the national anthem. And
definitely.
That is like a bit where you're like, ooh.
And the whole country's buzzing about it. And they're like, no matter your differences, everyone's just
like
buzzing
the World
about
Cup
this event for England.
This December, there's going to be England flags everywhere.
Exactly. But you guys do that all the time, which is awesome. Smash the like button if you enjoyed it, guys. Smash that subscribe button as well. Like I said, fingers crossed you guys don't argue in the comments right now, and it's all happy days. And what should we do?
Have a fantastic day and don't argue.
Yeah, don't argue. We'll see you legends in the next one. Peace.